Hey, everybody. Sorry about that little technical difficulty. Is it in the correct view now, John?
Yes, looking great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So good morning, everyone. See some faces. Everyone turn on the camera, please, if you can. All right, looks like we got a pretty good crowd this morning. Lots of folks on, lots of folks I recognize. So today is the last of the VR process series that we have been putting on since the beginning of spring. And we're going to wrap up today with the employment and post-employment steps of the VR process. So today's learning objectives are to present the criteria for post-employment services. Hang on a minute. I'm starting with post-employment. We're going to talk about the different activities and things that you'll be doing in the employment step of the VR process. And then we'll also be talking about the post-employment steps, how you're going to close a case successfully. You may perhaps close a case unsuccessfully. Now my computer's acting a fool again. Try that. How's that look?
There we go. Looks good.
Looks good. All right. So let me click through here. Gosh, daggone it. It keeps giving me the post-employment presentation. Sorry, guys. I swear I know what I'm doing. There we go. All right. So we're going to talk about, first of all, verifying the employment's been maintained for a minimum of 90 consecutive days. We're also going to talk about understanding the importance of making sure the employment outcome is consistent with the grade 8, the participant's strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. And then we're going to talk about completing a successful case closure in this first presentation.
And Jamie, we're still seeing
Yes.
your PowerPoint view. So if you can start the slideshow, I think it'll go to the. There we go. Thank you.
All right. That better? Okay. So let's talk about, first of all, what does successful employment outcome mean? It says here in our notes that the participant has achieved their employment outcome that was described in the IPE. Their employment outcome, again, is consistent with their strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capability, interest, and informed choice. The employment outcome also is in an integrated or the most integrated setting possible, which is consistent with the participant's informed choice. The participant is compensated at or above the minimum wage and receives at least the customary wage and benefit level paid to other employees performing similar work or for an employer. The employment has been maintained for a minimum of 90 consecutive days, and the employer, participant, and the counselor consider the employment situation and participant performance satisfactory. Does this sound familiar to everybody? Does anybody have any? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. Yeah, Philip says, yeah, that's right. They're working. They've been working for 90 days. They're happy on their job. The supervisor's happy with their work. Everything is consistent with what was in the IPE, with the employment goal. Anything else that pops out that anyone might suggest during this point of the actual VR services? What do you guys do when you have someone that has reached their employment goal and they're working? What do you think would be an important thing to check on at this point?
Wage and hours.
Absolutely.
Any accommodations that they may have needed?
Yeah. Is there anything in the case file itself we need to start paying attention to? Anything you think we might need to be doing at this point? Who takes a look at the IPE and at the services that we've put in place?
The counselor and the consumer?
Exactly. And what are you looking for?
That services fulfilled, if there's anything else needed. And for any kind of maintaining, if there's any amendments to the IPE or after closure, if they do need post-employment services.
Absolutely. So we're looking at, the services that we put in place, start dates, end dates. I'm sure there's maybe some invoicing that needs to take place. Paula, I see you're on here. What do you ask your counselors to look for at this point in the case?
This is for closure you're talking about?
For employment, yeah, for successful closure.
I think the stability, working with the consumer, we are talking about 90 days, but you don't just count the 90 days and then close folks out. So it's important, as you mentioned, to look at the grade 8, strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, etc., making sure that the consumer is stable in their employment. So some of these areas that you have, documenting the wage, documenting number of hours, and like you said, the last one is a satisfactory employment. So most of these areas that you cover, but I think that the most important thing is making sure that the consumer is satisfied with that employment. They're stable in their job, and again, documenting their wages and for the closure.
Absolutely. Wayne, do you have anything you would like to add to that? Uh-oh, did I lose you? Did I lose Wayne? Okay, we'll move on. So yeah, just as Paula said, these are things that we really need to be looking at once I think we get that conception in our mind. They're employed, close them, get that successful closure, But no, there's a lot that goes on once employment starts. And, like Paula said, it's not just they work for 90 days, you close the case, boom, it's all over with. No, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So let's look, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a question. So I was just wondering, how long do programs typically follow those participants after a case closure?
Well, depending on your project's policies, I would definitely look at your policy and procedures manual. But for me personally, I felt like we followed the case for at least a year because you want to do that first year follow-up report. And you want to see, you know, if there's any possibility that they may need post-employment services. If they do, usually best practice is to do those post-employment services within 12 months of closure. But there may be other reasons that you do or do not do that amount of time, you know, depending on what your project has set up as far as parameters for follow-up on cases. But I would say at least 12 months.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So let's look at the goals of the employment step. First of all, the goal is to provide assistance and accommodations to the participant to achieve their employment goals. Okay, great. We've done that. They're employed. You're going to continue to provide counseling and guidance throughout this period, address any impediments, making sure that you've removed any obstacles. Just because they go to work doesn't mean that everything magically falls into place and there's no additional problems. You know, you may still need to work out some accommodations with them or for them with the employer. Things start happening once people go to work. Sometimes they do start employment and then issues pop up on the job site or with supervision or with coworkers or with, you know, a number of different things that may not be directly related to the disability, but then some things may show up that are directly related to the disability. So you're going to continue to look at those impediments on the job site. Also assisting them in continuing to maintain or retain that employment. We want to make sure that they make it, you know, through that 90-day period and beyond. Also in verifying that the employment outcome is consistent with their IPE employment goals. Verifying that the employment is competitive and integrated. You know, sometimes we have to really advocate for the participant on the job site if things are not as they should be. And sometimes things change, you know, once they start working with other individuals, issues come up. And we want to make sure that they are achieving the most integrated setting possible for them. Also determining that the employment outcome is maintained for a minimum of 90 consecutive days before you close the case out. And also, I think the most important thing is making sure that they're satisfied with their employment outcome. You know, you never know until you actually get on the job site whether things are the way that they're supposed to be, or if you feel like you're doing what you wanted to do to begin with when you started that job. You know, sometimes, you know, I can't stress enough how much advocacy plays a role in our counseling and guidance in these cases. Does anybody have any examples? Maybe some of you more experienced counselors on here might have something to share about once your participant starts their employment goal and they're on the job site, what are some things that might pop up?
Maybe a certification of some kind.
Yep. Good point. What else? Does anyone have it? Yep, go ahead.
Unforeseen accommodation that might be needed, whether it's an office chair or a need for an extra break.
Exactly. Things just happen, you know, and until you actually get on the job site, I'm sure you've probably prior to the start of the job, you've done an assessment of the work site to make sure that it's adequate. But I know myself personally, as a counselor, I had a case where the individual, she was a seamstress, but she had some disability related issues, and she had not worked for a while, but then she wanted to go back to work as a seamstress. And she located a job opening in her area. It was easily transportation was easy to get to and from the job site. And then she interviewed. We were able to provide her with some mobility equipment that would help her get from her vehicle into the job site. And then it wasn't until she actually started the job that her workstation was not working for her. She was uncomfortable in the workstation. She could not do the work that she had been hired to do. And so there was some additional things that had to be adjusted for her actual workstation so that she could do the job that she was hired to do. So that's just an example, of things that happen once people start work. Anyone else?
Maybe some tools or clothing.
Exactly. That's a good example. I mean, we try to make sure before they start that we've done an assessment to make sure, if they do need uniforms or if they need nursing shoes or welding supplies or tools, that we already have included that in the IPE. But sometimes, just like you said, Tammy, things pop up at the last minute, and then you need to make an amendment to the IPE and add some additional work supplies or items needed. That's great. Great feedback, guys. So let's look at some examples of employment activities or some resources. And we also have some templates of different forms. If you are looking for forms to use in your daily work or forms to use with your case files, we have a checklist, and I have some additional information about on-the-job supports and self-employment. So let me open up some of these forms real quick. Does everybody have a case note file or a case note template that they're using?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Here's a blank case note. And I think Wayne created this when he developed the case file example. So, I mean, this is a real simple Word document. It's on our website on the VR process page on the avertac.org website. If you go to employment and go to the toolbox for that section of the VR process, in that toolbox, there's this blank case note. And I can't say it enough how important case noting is at every step. Every time something happens with that particular case, we need to case note. So here's what an example of a blank case note, and we've got draft on here, but you can save this and you can actually put your logo, your project's name. You can fancy this up any way you want to. Put a header on there with, contact information, your address, phone number, if you want to do that. Or you can just use a simple blank case note, and it's fillable, so you can just type in the blanks here, fill in that information. And then there's an actual box down here, a text box in the bottom where you can type your case notes in there. So that's a blank case note. In case you need one, you can go to our website and download it.
We have a date column on the left on ours. So that
Uh-huh.
each time there's a contact, then, you know, we case note it. So
Okay.
just, that one has a date at the top. So
Uh-huh.
it seems like one page for each case note, but we have on the left-hand side, a column for a date. And so each time there is contact, counseling and guidance, you know, we document ours like that. And I think there's some
Nice.
comments in the chat box, Jamie.
Okay. Let me see if I can open that chat real quick. Yep. Carol, you're exactly right. Every time you make contact with a client, document it. I can't say it enough. Document, 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 document. It's important. You got to be able to tell the story and allow anyone in your office that works with your project that has to review that case file or look in that case file. You got to have notes in there to tell the story from beginning to end or beginning to wherever you are with the case, you know, and that allows someone else to, if they need to work with that participant, to know what's going on. Tammy says, even when I just touch the case file, I case note it. Great comment, Tammy. Yep, Carol, that's right. If you do anything with that file, and I like that you talked about specific sections in your file for case notes. That's great. Usually on the inside folder, I'd say, is the greatest place to put your case notes, because that way, you know, anyone that's working with that file can read it from beginning to end. Usually put the oldest ones in first, and then just as your new case notes happen, put them on top. So it's kind of chronological order from the last case note to the first one. Amanda, you want to talk about that? Running case note? I like that.
Hi, so we have a Word document, and at the beginning, we'll have like in bold, who referred that consumer. Then we make case note, a phone call was made to make an appointment. And then we have another header that's like intake orientation, and we'll have a short description of how we met that consumer. Then we have the, you know, the fact that we signed their application. We have a section where we're identifying what the disabilities are, using, you know, the codes, RSA codes, and then what that disability is and what their goal is. I believe, I think we go to the JAN to look up a code for a specific job, whether it's competitive or native crafts, and we'll code that in. And then we do sort of copy and paste a brief description of the IPE once that's developed, but it can be kind of cumbersome. So I'm thinking of just, you know, maybe our counselors just case note, you know, look at the next section or review the IPE on file that's signed. And then that's because, so we still have a hard copy file on all of our consumers. We do not have one of the databases operating yet, like Handle It, or, you know, we literally just have a spreadsheet. We've got different tabs, you know, current cases, closed, old, that we shipped over. It's password protected. And then maybe if Philip wants to add anything, he's on. Thanks.
Thank you. Philip, you want to add any to that?
You're on mute, Philip. Oh. He's trying to unmute himself.
Okay.
Well, the only thing you were saying, the case note, everything that goes on with the consumer. So even if we're speaking to a vendor that we're going to purchase from for the consumer, we classify that as action taken. Then we case note what we're looking for and what the vendor told us and stuff like that.
That's great.
Yeah, and like Amanda said, we do summarize the IPE and the case notes. And
Yeah.
earlier when you were talking about, well, the way I do it, prior to a successful closure, I would ask a consumer for, especially if he's in competitive employment, I would ask the consumer to send me check stubs to
Yep.
verify the employment. And up here, we have a lot of our consumers in subsistence IPE, due to the fact that there's not many jobs in the villages. So we send them receipts that their customers would sign. Then they send it back to us. And that's how we monitor their progress.
Mhm.
So I hope that was helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you for sharing with us, Philip, the way that you case note and the things that you look for when you're getting to the closure status of your cases. I'm going to share with you guys an example, and this is just an example. It's not, carved in stone. You don't have to absolutely do it this way, but can you see this case note for Jan Duck? Everybody see that? So this is a case note for successful employment outcome. And it's just a real brief. It says Jan's case will close successfully on this date. She's working at XYZ medical office as a front desk receptionist. She earns $9.25 an hour. She works approximately 20 to 24 hours a week. Benefits are currently not available. She says she's satisfied with her employment and is earning a wage that is comparable to others in the field. The counselor is also satisfied with the client's job placement. That means you've gone out there and checked it out, and she seems to be very happy on the job site. Everything seems to be working okay. So it seems satisfactory to you as her counselor. The plan was written for office clerk, and the job matches the vocational goal. So services that assisted Jan to obtain and maintain her employment were counseling and guidance, employment services, an AT assessment, a functional capacity assessment, and work exploration services, all contributed to her successful employment. Jan has successfully maintained employment and has met the criteria of an employment outcome, integrated and competitive, and has been placed into an employment setting consistent with her abilities, capabilities, interest, and informed choice. So both Jan and the counselor view this employment outcome as satisfactory per discussion with Jan. And TVR has contributed to the successful outcome of employment by providing the aforementioned services. What does everyone think about that case note? Anybody have any comments? Philip's giving us the thumbs up. Y'all think that tells the story? Anyone? Would anyone add something to that case note? Take away?
Hello, it's a good case note, but it really sounds subjective.
Uh-huh.
Try not to make them so subjective.
Mhm. Explain that, Susie.
So, this is Janine. Let me step up.
Hey,
So, so, when you're talking about, did it say the client was happy with the work? And
Yep.
it's like, that's subjective. Did the client voice that they were happy, or did you just decide they were happy? I mean, where did that come from? How are you
good.
defining that? And then that you were satisfied with their work, but what does
How do you
your
base that?
satisfaction, where's the base for that? Yes, they met the criteria, but saying that you're satisfied as the counselor is subjective.
And really,
Yep.
what we're feeling as the counselor, I mean, we may be jumping inside for these people, which we usually are, but that's not really part of a case note. So we have to keep those case notes clean and right to the facts. I mean, it's like documentation. Documentation is huge. And how we document everything that we do needs to tell the story, but take out those personal pieces that are subjective. That's just how we do it.
Very good. I like it.
But we can't.
Anyone
see
else?
to reread.
Say again.
We couldn't see. It's really small on the screen. I can see that it's a case note, but there's no reading it. I guess my
Oh,
bigger
okay.
magnifiers, but
Me too. Me too. So yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. I thought when I first read that case note, this sounds like computer generated garble to me. I mean, it kind of hit all the high notes, but I don't know. It seemed kind of stale. It was a little, I don't know. I mean, it was a good case note. It did list everything that you're supposed to in the case note. Talked about the wage. You need to know the wage information. It talked about the number of hours that she worked per week. Talked about the job setting. Talked about her satisfactory in the job. But yeah, it seemed kind of cold to me. And I guess you shouldn't put a whole lot of emotion into your case notes. I tend to, but yeah. Anyone else have an opinion about that? Amanda, it looks like you have something to say.
No, I'm just looking at the different case narratives from Tammy and Rachel. And then I threw one in there too for good measure. That's all.
and we always need to write our case notes like they're going to have to be defended. So you put in those words and you do those things, and if it has to be defended, how did you know on that day that she was so happy? And I mean, so that's where our case notes come out of for our writing is if we ever have to defend this, we need to be able to have documentation that will stand up to what we're being asked.
That's right. That's absolutely right. If you write it and put it in the file, personally, I feel like when you write your case notes, be prepared that they could be printed in the New York Times. You know, if someone comes back later on and says, wait a minute, this is what was written in the case note. You know, that's kind of how I feel personally about it. Let's see, what Rachel said that this might be similar to what Paula mentioned with the date on the side and multiple entries can be on one page. Yep. Yep, that's right. I like that format. And Rachel also shared the blank narrative log. I like that. Tammy says, sometimes I put the contact at their work. Absolutely. You need that work information, the location, the supervisor's name, the address, the phone number. We definitely need all of that information in there. Yep, Adrian said her supervisor. Amanda shared a blank case note as well. I want to open up your case note, Amanda. Uh-oh, where'd it go? Do you mind if I share it, Amanda?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Did everyone see that? Does this kind of look like what folks use when they're case noting? This is pretty extensive. It's got all of the information. Can you guys see that? Do I need to make it larger?
We can see it.
Okay. It's got a lot of, and this kind of looks like the referral on the left. It says, oh, it does. It says referral up at the top, a referral form. And then
Initial interview, it looks like.
Yep. Sure does. So yeah, I mean, there's all types of formats for case noting, you know, whatever works for you best. Nothing is, you know, in stone. Nothing is completely one way or the other. Just whatever works for you, for your project, that's what's most important. Let's see, I'm gonna look at, I was trying to open an unsuccessful case note. Let's see what this looks like. How's that look? Can everyone see that? It says progress note. It
Yes.
basically says, it's been decided at this time to unsuccessfully close XXX's case for the following reasons. Failure to
Okay.
cooperate
Jamie,
before, yes.
would you mind zooming in on the bottom right? Just press that little plus button in the bottom right corner of the Word document.
Yeah. How's
We have
that?
a request for zooming in. Thank you.
I mean, that doesn't look like it's zooming in on this one. How about that?
There we go.
This case note is like cold as ice to me. It could be another computer generated case note.
It looks like an afterthought.
Right? Let's see, the reason it was closed, failure to cooperate. Okay. Before closing this case, this counselor undertook the following actions to ensure this individual had ample and advance opportunity to appeal this decision. Okay. Letters were sent to contact the VR counselor as well as phone contact was attempted. When none of the above actions were successful, XXX was sent a closure letter along with a copy of request for review of counselor determination, their rights. Since the case was in, aha, this tells me something, status codes. This case was in status 13, the IPE closure page for the return, for the consumer to return comments on this closure notice was also sent. The above items are in the client's ECF. I'm assuming that's electronic case file. No significant IPE service were given to the client. Since there was no response to the closure letter that was sent, this case is closed, status 28. Well, that kind of tells us where this case note came from, doesn't it? Does everyone document their unsuccessful closures with a case note similar to this?
This is Paula. We document, but we don't use terminology like failure to cooperate. Some of these items in here, you know, we should be strengths-based.
Mhm.
We just described the situation, just like they said, the facts. So were we unable to contact them? Was that, did they
That's what it
request
sounds
that
like
we,
to me.
did they request that their case be closed? I mean, so we'll state those kinds of things in there rather than failure to cooperate.
Yeah. To me, it seemed like that this case closure was just based on the fact that they kind of lost contact with the consumer, right? We don't know for sure the consumer didn't cooperate. Maybe they moved and no forwarding address. You know what I'm saying? Like, this was a little harsh to me. It did have the elements of an unsuccessful case closure. You know, you sent them a letter, and there was no response. You tried to call them, you couldn't get in contact with them. So to me, this was just more of a loss of contact closure than a failure to cooperate.
Well,
I don't know why that. Go ahead,
And
Philip.
Well, don't you also have to find out if the consumer is incarcerated or not?
Mhm.
That could be a reason they don't contact. You couldn't make contact.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
We would call that unavailable for services. So there's always you know, a reason. Again, follow your policies. If you're supposed to reach out to them two different kinds of ways, like email, texting, letter, then document those times that you've reached out to them. So
Yeah,
follow
that's
your
right.
policies.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paula. Let's get back to employment. We kind of got down that road of different types of closure, but we really are focusing on successful closure today at employment. I want to look at some resources that we have on the website. And let me zoom in on this so you can see it better. Is that too large? Can everyone read that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Hang on, I see a comment in the chat box. Let me get over there to it. Susie said, we document the reason why we're closing at this time, and that if things change and they can come back, this is also in the letter of closure after a 10-day letter has gone out, and we have not heard from them or the letter is returned. Susie, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but can we talk about that 10-day letter?
Sure, we send a 10-day letter if we haven't heard from someone for a while, or they're not following through. We have in our application piece and IEP or IPE, I can't even, I've been in the school all day. We have in their IPE that they will make contact with us twice a month until employed, and then once a month after employment. So if we haven't heard from somebody, we send a 10-day letter letting them know they need to make an appointment. Please come see us. Let us know what works in their schedule. We try to leave it as open as we can. And then if that letter comes back or we don't hear from them, we sit for another 10 days or maybe 30 days, depending on if we know they're in the community and something's going on with their family, because we're a small community. And then if we don't hear anything, then we do a letter of closure and let them know that the door's always open. You know, we never are punitive, and we always let them know that please come back when things change and you have time to start back with us again. And then we close.
Absolutely. That's correct. And so kind of the rule of thumb or the best practice, I guess you would say, Paula, you probably would agree, I'm not sure. But prior to case closure, you always send that 10-day letter. And basically you're just giving them some forewarning, you know, and just maybe even reminding the individual, we haven't had contact. We're at that point where the case is not moving forward. So, you know, this is your notification. We don't hear from you within, you know, 10 days. Usually we're going to close this case. We can reopen it at a later date if it's better for you. But yeah, it's really important to get that 10-day letter out before you close the case.
And again, state all of those things, as you said, Jamie, that, you know, that we will be closing if we do not hear from you. So.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Susie.
Mhm.
And Carol says in the chat, does anyone make physical contact as in drive to a location? I mean, I've done home visits. Yeah.
But
You want to talk about that more, Carol? Yeah,
Y'all know
Rachel.
I'm new to the VR and I came from social work. So I'm thinking like a welfare check to make sure that person's okay. Is there anything going on?
Yeah.
Transportation
says
is
yes.
Transportation is a huge issue here, I'm sure in other places. So we do make home visits. We have chapter house locations in 110 chapter communities. So that might be an area where we would meet consumers as well. But we do home visits because we know that transportation can be a major issue.
Yeah. That's right. You know, our field of work is a lot different than someone that works in a metropolitan area, especially these very rural locations. I can recall meeting a consumer at the rest stop on 64, you know, going from Phoenix to San Carlos because they lived within walking distance of the rest area. So we always met at the rest area at the picnic table there. You know, you just do what you have to do sometimes. But that welfare check was I like that idea because sometimes when you lose contact, you just don't know. And the family members are not familiar with Voc Rehab. They may not even know the individual has been working with Voc Rehab, you know? So sometimes there is some health issues going on and no one is really aware to contact you and let you know what's happening. Unfortunately, myself personally, I found out that a consumer was deceased by a family member because I kept trying to contact someone. And finally, I got in touch with a family member who advised me that the consumer was deceased. So, you know, those are just some different examples of reaching out and trying to make that contact. Okay,
Can I
Yep,
make
Phil.
another comment on that?
Sir.
Oftentimes when we find out if a consumer is incarcerated, then we would place that individual in interrupted status. And we have a data sheet that we go by. That's my comment of the day.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, thank you for that reminder. Because there's many different situations where you lose contact with a consumer, and that would be a perfect example of one of those situations. I want to share with you guys, I should have shared this with you earlier when we were actually talking about closure. But we have a resource document on the website when you go to the VR process and you get to the employment section and look in the toolbox. There's this document located in there, and it says job support services. And it just talks about a different variety of job support services that can be provided. The community-based assessment is usually prior to writing the IPE. Job placement assistance, we know what that is. Job retention assistance, job search and job readiness. Those are all services. But I want to get to this section here when we're talking about employment, and sometimes those situations where we have to assist the individual once they do become employed. On the job supports, are support services provided to a participant who's been placed in employment and may need extra support in order to be successful in that position and increase the likelihood of job retention. These supports may include job coaching, follow-up and follow along, and job retention services. Also supported employment, usually in the cases with the most significant disability, seeking competitive and integrative employment. That may be a situation where you need more supported employment. And also work adjustment is another service that participants can receive, some work adjustment training provided by any type of vendor that you may have that provides those services. And that's, job coaching services that are also requiring on the job supports, to make sure they're successful on the job, make sure that everything with the employment site is compatible with them and their disability and their job goal. So I just wanted to share that with you quickly because that is a resource on our website and you may want to take a look at that. And I see some questions in the chat. Elise said, in the case of incarceration for more than 30 days, do you close the case? That's a good question, Elise. I'm personally, if the individual is going to be incarcerated, then that means to me that they are not able to participate in the case moving forward, that they are not able to participate, and that they cannot seek employment. So I feel like that, yes, you would close that case. Does anyone else have a different opinion?
What about if the consumer was like in a halfway house where they are able to go out and seek employment?
I feel like personally that if they are able to participate in VR services and they are able to participate in work activities, then yeah, I would keep the case open. But if they're incarcerated and they're going to be incarcerated, it looks like maybe for a certain amount of time, then they're not able to participate. I think that would be the difference.
Yeah.
And then Leslie says, do you have access to the slides? Yes, you'll get a follow-up email after today's presentation with a copy of the slides and with the materials that we presented today. And I think there'll be a link to a survey too that we'll ask you to complete. So yeah, you'll have access to everything that we looked at today. And then let's see, let's move on to wanted to share with you another resource that we have on the website as well. It is a little heavy on the regulation side, so it may look unfamiliar, but I just wanted to let you know that when you're looking at employment, these are some of the things that you should probably thinking about, and self-employment is one of those things. And this is a lot of things that should be done prior to actually closure. This is self-employment assistance, talking about the consultation and the business plan, you know, any of these assessments and things that are related to self-employment. I just wanted to share this resource with you so that you would have more information to go on when you get to the closure portion. And I don't know if anyone actually saw that on our website earlier, but that self-employment piece is also a big part of making sure that all the services have been completed, all the assessments done, the business plan, and everything is in place prior to closure. And Lord, we are running out of time. Let me go ahead and get over to the post-employment. Okay, does anyone have any questions about employment? Seems like when we get to employment, oh my God, we've done all the work. We've put all the services in place. We've paid all the vendors. You know, all the hard work's paying off now. The individual's employed. Shoo, take a breath. Does anyone feel that way? You feel like when you get to employment, oh my gosh, all the work's done. I see a comment over in the chat. Susie said, if they're in our local jails and will be incarcerated 30 to 60 days, there are work skills they can participate in through other programs around employment. We would not close them yet. That's a good point, Susie.
So my question with that, do you all contact them, or do you, I mean, how do you gain the knowledge that they're incarcerated, they're in there for a certain amount of time? How do you find out, you know, if they're going to be working in those programs?
Susie, you going to answer that?
Because I'm just wondering, like, you know, that sounds pretty, you know, something to work with, you know, if they're still learning skills.
Yeah, I couldn't get to my mute, you guys. My mouse was going crazy, sorry. So, not necessarily do we make the contact with them, but other programs do and then let us know. We have several programs that go to the jails. We also have a jail page that we look at if we haven't seen somebody for a while before we send a 10-day letter or any of that. So we kind of stalk them, for a better word, and see where they are. And then we'll let if we have an ROI, then we let other services know that please reach out and let them know that they need to be participating in something that will benefit them when they get out. And then we usually see them right after they have left the jails. So we personally, VR does not go to the jail. We could, but we don't. I'm
That's
going
good
to read
information.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. That is good information. And some, you know, folks work differently. What works for Susie's project may not work for your project. You may have to approach it in a different way. But that is good information. And I think, like she said, the agency that they're working with while they're incarcerated may be a good networking tool for you and your office. Amanda says, when we get to employment, celebrate the 90-day employment with the counselor too, that they've done a lot to help get the consumer there. So yeah, I'm like you, Amanda. I feel like when we get to the 90 days, yes, there needs to be some sort of celebration. I know I'm going to jump around in my office a little bit. Because daggone it, I want to count that as a successful closure. Adrian says that our local newspaper lists all the arrests made daily. So that is usually how we find out someone's been incarcerated. Yep, those mug shots. That's a pretty good clue that your consumer is not going to be able to participate. But I like the idea that what Susie shared with us, just because they're incarcerated, maybe they're going to be incarcerated for a short period of time, and you may not want to close them out. But yeah, I like that resource, Adrian. Am I the only one that looks through the paper to see who's been charged for what? Oh, we got to move on. All right. Post-employment. So successful closure, 90 days employment. You've followed up with all of the necessary paperwork and all of the necessary information that you need. You successfully closed the case. Everyone's celebrating. Yay! Successful closure. And then about 90 days later, or 3 months after you've closed, you get a phone call. And this is usually when post-employment services begin. So post-employment services based upon ABER's best practices may be provided for an individual if they've successfully achieved 90 days consecutive days of employment according to their IPE. They need to maintain, regain, or advance in employment consistent with the grade 8. Their strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. If the case has been closed within the last 12 months. And I say that 12 months, and that's not written in stone. I mean, that's just best practice. If they've successfully employed and closed within a 12-month period, then it's best to go ahead and just reopen the same case with post-employment services. You're going to add an amendment to the IPE and put some services in place. But here's the important piece of that. The services that they need are limited in scope and duration and do not require a complex or comprehensive level of service. So basically what we're saying is, if something major is going on, maybe their disability changed and you've completely got to rewrite the IPE and add a whole lot of different services and more complex services. No, I don't think that's a situation where you would have post-employment services. Other people may disagree. They may feel like that, why close out the case and reopen a new case when you're just providing additional services? But really, post-employment is meant to be, for a short duration, nothing major, just a few things, adjustments, or maybe some additional services that are going to be short-term. To me, that's what post-employment is. And post-employment services, can include a variety of VR services or a combination of services. So like transportation, maintenance, maintenance meaning food or shelter or something related to the service that was previously in the IPE. Anytime you need to maintain a service, when I say maintenance, I don't mean like fix their car or fix their house or some sort of maintenance like that. We're saying that you need to add some things in place. Perhaps they have to go get a certification, like I think Susie said earlier, but they have to go somewhere, stay for a week. You may provide services that pay for their food and meals and transportation or their lodging, while they're getting that certification. Those are the type of temporary services we're talking about when we talk about maintenance. And they may be provided in conjunction with the other services that are already in the IPE. Counseling guidance is very important during post-employment, just like any other phase of the VR process. And post-employment services are provided under amended IPEs and must be relevant to the original IPE. So what we're saying is when you put post-employment services in place, you know, you're not doing a complete overhaul of the IPE. You're basically amending the IPE that's already in place. You're adding some short-term services or some minor services, and it has to be relevant to the original IPE. You can't go off doing some other type of services that don't even really originate from the original IPE. That's what we're saying when we say post-employment services. And then in the amendment to the IPE, when you're providing post-employment services, you need some of these components, the following components: a description of the terms and conditions for the provision of all the recommended post-employment services, the anticipated duration of the new post-employment services, and a required statement of how the post-employment services will be provided through comparable benefits if another provider is necessary, such as a state or a tribal program. So these are things that we must keep in mind when we're writing that amendment to the IPE. You know, you need a description of what you're doing, what type of services are in the post-employment, also the length of time of the post-employment services, and then also if there's some comparable benefits that apply, you need to go ahead and add them into the IPE service as well. And then here are some links to some of the regulations that apply to post-employment services. And just a quick note, something that we needed to bring up was that a new determination of eligibility is not required to provide post-employment services. So, you know, basically you're saying the disability is pretty much the same. There hasn't been a major change to the disability. And so therefore you wouldn't need to do a new eligibility determination. Post-employment eligibility, these are some things, and this is a kind of a checklist that Suzanne Mawson, who used to be with AVERTAC, developed. And it says that you need to kind of look at these questions and ask yourself before you provide post-employment services, do they need it? Do they need post-employment to maintain, regain, or advance in employment? Are the needs of post-employment services consistent with the individual's strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, and interests according to informed choice? So do they need the services? Do they have to have those services to maintain, regain, or advance in employment? And did the individual request post-employment services to achieve a 90-day employment outcome in accordance with their IPE? Basically, we're saying, did they work for 90 days consecutively before they asked for post-employment services? And if so, these are some important things to look at. Was the individual's case closed successfully with an applicable IPE, and was it within the last 12 months? So you'll want to look at the date of the case closure and then also the date of the post-employment request. And also, if you're amending the IPE, are those post-employment services relevant to the original IPE? And then also, you want to look at when was the IPE amended? Was it written in order to provide relevant services? So you want to make sure you have that date of the IPE amendment included in the new IPE. Does the IPE amendment contain a description of the terms and conditions for the provision of all of these recommended services, post-employment services? Does the IPE amendment include the duration of the post-employment services to be provided? So you're looking at start and end dates for those post-employment services. You know, does it meet the same requirements as the previous services provided during all of the stages of the VR process? Are comparable services and benefits utilized according to the regulations and project guidelines? So you may want to look at your policy and procedures, make sure that your post-employment services are outlined in that manual and that you're going by those policies and procedures. And then also an explanation should be included in a case note about any comparable benefits that they receive during the post-employment services period. All right, we kind of rushed through that quickly. I want to share one more form with you very quickly. First of all, let's stop. Anybody have any questions about post-employment? I see Carol shaking her head no.
There's some in the chat.
Okay. I don't know where all my support went today. Someone was supposed to be helping me with the chat today.
I can read them if you want.
Do you mind, Paula? That way I can go ahead and start opening some forms.
Okay, Amanda comments, we add a header, post-employment services and case noted. We have post-employment services listed on the original IPE and we add information there or amend IPE or need to make sure we're doing it. Angela Stevens, what if a consumer leaves a position of clerk job and moves to another employer with the same type of position, clerk job? Angela, I don't know if you want to expand on your question, but. And then there's one other question after that. Rachel Allen, do any programs take income into consideration for post-employment services? They could potentially have been working for several months with paychecks. This would fall into the, do they need services consideration? Another question, what are the timeframes other programs use aside from the 12 months, out of curiosity?
I'm sorry, I was reading some of my forms I was trying to open up. So
Go
do
ahead,
any
Angela.
programs?
Go ahead, Angela.
Hello, Angela from Cook and Tribal Council. I was wondering, say a consumer is working for agency A, but for some reason the company closes and the consumer has worked successfully for 90 plus days, and then we put them in post-employment and they're moving to another employer B, and they're still working as a clerk, does that still stay in post-employment?
Well, I mean, personally, I feel like that when they stay in the same job family, says that they had a clerk job and then they moved from one employer to another employer with the same clerk job. So they're staying in the same job family. They have achieved the same employment goal. Their employer has just changed. Personally, I would move ahead with post-employment services. We may have some other opinions. You know, when employers change, there could be a reason with the job site. Maybe they just got a raise and someone else said, hey, come be a clerk over here and I'll pay you $2 more on the hour plus benefits, you know? So it depends on the circumstances. Personally, that's how I would approach it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And I was going to share with you guys a checklist.
You want to respond to Rachel's question?
I hadn't read it yet.
Do any programs take income into consideration for post-employment services? They could potentially have been working for several months with paychecks. This would fall in the do they need services consideration? And then that's the first question. Second question is, what are the timeframes other programs use aside from the 12 months, just out of curiosity?
So let's look at the first question. Does anybody take income into consideration for post-employment? Do you take income into consideration for any VR services? Is it needs-based? Does your project have policy and procedures that state that financial need has to be identified before you'll provide services? I'd like to hear some comments on that. Anybody?
Yeah, we don't do financial consideration. We look at comparable benefits. So if you're working and something medical or dental or eyes, what other services are there? You have insurance. You've been to the clinic, you know, because we are last pay. So we do take those considerations, but we do not. You can't be over income at this point in our work. Others might take that, but don't. I know states look at that.
Yeah, that was a big adjustment for me coming from state VR is, you know, oh gosh, we had so much financial needs requirements, which I felt was ridiculous, that you would have to verify 3 months of someone's bank statements or any type of income, their financial household income, any benefits they receive. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, that was so intrusive and unnecessary. But you know, we don't do that in TVR. Most programs do not anyway. So I'm curious, Rachel, you want to add something to that about income need for post-employment?
I don't know if her mic is working.
Oh, okay. All right. And then your second question about the 12 months time frame. Amanda says we use a 3-year window.
Go ahead.
She says they use a 3-year window. Once they've closed successfully for post-employment services, they can track up to 180 days more if they need to. And she said that they find that sometimes consumers still may relapse and are hesitant to stop checking in, you know, and it's just a case-by-case basis. And Rachel said she was just wondering if anybody does that as far as financial need, that they do have some close with high-paying wages, and they haven't been in that situation for post-employment services. But it could be at some point. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It could change. So you could get to that point. Miranda had a question in here, said, what about if they're asking for services related to a separate job that they started after closure while maintaining their other one? So you close them successfully 90 days for their employment that was related to the IPE, right? I think I'm following this correctly. And then, wow, they're an overachiever because they went and got a second job. That's awesome. To me, it would depend. I mean, there's a lot of what ifs in this question. Is the second job related to the services in the original IPE? Is it the same job goal? Is it the same job family? Do they need accommodations or do they need VR services to maintain that second employment? So there would be, to me, there'd be a lot of questions you'd have to answer before providing post-employment services, because you would definitely have to capture that second employment need or VR services need prior to providing any post-employment that was related to the second employment. And Miranda said, yeah. Okay. All right. So real quick, we got to close out here soon, but I wanted to share with you a checklist that is related to post-employment. Again, this was developed by Suzanne Mawson, who I want to make sure I open the right one. Can you guys see that form? It says successful closure checklist and
Yes.
consultation. Okay. So this was a nice checklist that Suzanne developed about post-employment. And basically you're just documenting all of these things. You know, did they maintain employment for 90 days? Did you talk about case closure with the consumer? Was there a closure letter sent? Were post-employment services explained but weren't required at that time? Also CAP. You need to review that CAP with them before closing out. And then if you have any explanation for any additional consultation items that were not completed. Also, compatibility with the job site. You want to make sure you check off these items, that everything was integrated on the work site, that they're being compensated fairly at above or at least minimum wage. And then here's where we can record all of the employment information. You want to make sure you have the job title, the employer's name, the address, their phone number, the name of their supervisor, and the hours that they're working per week, also their hourly wage or their weekly earnings, and then sign that and put that into the case file as well. And that document is also available on our website. If you go to the toolbox for VR services or VR process and go to post-employment services. So we kind of rushed through that, but just wanted to provide as much information as we could. Leslie. Okay, Leslie, I see your direct message. I'll email you. Thank you everyone for participating today. I want to thank you for Susie and Amanda and Paula for giving us some good information that your programs use. Philip, thank you for always adding great discussion to our questions and information. You're a great resource and mentor for some of these new counselors. And just thank you everybody for participating today and sharing some information with each other. I think that's the best way for us to learn is bouncing things off of each other. What works for you, what doesn't work. Real quick, a reminder, the June conference, everybody should have gotten an email with the conference information. If you are planning to come to the conference in June in Phoenix, we sent out all of the information. I just hope some of you guys can come and we can see each other in person finally. It's been a long time. And, you know, this may be our only opportunity this year to see each other, you know, if we don't have a KNAR conference. So just wanted to get that out there. And you can go to Avertac's website or you can go to IHD at NAU. And all of the conference links are in there. And thanks, everybody. I hope we get to see you in person soon. Have a great day.
Bye.
That's the Price is Right. Spin a wheel.
Jamie,
Yes.
that last form that you shared is wonderful. Could there be a spot in there for if the person is receiving benefits like insurance? Because that's really a nice one sheet to have in the front of a file once you've closed somebody out and to know if they're receiving those benefits.
Yeah,
If they do
absolutely.
come back. Mhm.
Yeah.
If they do
And
come
feel
back.
free, if you want to download that, form, feel free to make it your own, add to it or take away from it. But I like that idea of adding insurance benefits in there because that's really important.
Mhm.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Great webinar, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk
I'm
to you
gonna
soon.
miss the VR process. We've been going over this for the last few months.
I know, we went through this a year ago too, when we were starting. Oh my gosh, Wayne made an appearance.
I had to bless you, Susie. I had to.
I was wondering, you look like the hunter.